Hello, it's Gareth here again. This is the Somewhere on Earth podcast, and it's Tuesday, the 29th of October, 2024. We're here in London, and in fact, all our guests, we're all around the table here in London, which is all jolly nice. And yes, it's week 2. Would you believe it? Yes, week 2 of our life on the Evergreen Podcast Network. Of course, there'll be people who've been with us for a lot longer than just 2 weeks, but you know what I mean. And if you want to find out more about Evergreen, then just go to our website and then click on the Evergreen logo. That'll take you to their website, and you can fish around for some other top podcasts from around the world. There's true crime, music, history, you name the genres, they're all there, and there's a little bit of tech, and we're part of that. So go and find some other stuff, but stay here as well, if you know what I mean. And coming up on this podcast today, why are fewer women than men using AI at work? Now, this is a complex story about education, about bias, about how women's jobs are more likely to be at risk from AI. So we'll be unpicking the issues with a leading tech consultant. Also today, do you have a novel inside you just waiting to get out? Well, if the whole idea of writing it up, sorting out the cover art, self-publishing, and even releasing an audiobook has been kind of holding you back, then stay tuned. Someone who's been through that process is here to help you harness tech to make that book dream happen for you. Yes, it's all right here on the Somewhere on Earth podcast. And I'm in excellent company today with editor and creator of this podcast, Ania Lichtarowicz, right here in the studio. Hello, Ania.
Hello, Gareth. How are you?
Thanks for asking. I'm all right, thank you.
Good.
Yeah, all good. Yeah, absolutely. And a full show today, as you would know, Ania, because you set it all up. So
I know. Always far too much editing at the end. I always curse myself for it.
Nice problem to have, though. So Anya's on board, and we'll be hearing Ania chip in as we go along. And we're going to start with this one. Women are adopting AI at work less than men. But why? One person who's researching the whole area is Susi O'Neill, who's founder and executive director of the technology and communications consultancy EVA. And one of Susi's big drives is to make AI work for everyone. Just recently, she marked Ada Lovelace Day, calling for people to spread the word about her research in women and AI adoption. So this is very much about awareness raising. And Ada Lovelace Day is, of course, the annual event that celebrates the contributions of women to science, technology, engineering and mathematics. Susi, welcome along to Somewhere on Earth.
Pleasure to be back, Gareth.
Yeah, and welcome back, by the way. Yep, had you on a little while ago. I'm glad you came back. So how did it emerge to you that women don't use AI as much as men? Is it just something that's generally known, or is this something that you found out and then you wanted to look into further?
Well, the way I work is I'm a very curious person, so I pick up a little source here and I do a lot of reading about AI strategy, because my business is helping businesses adopt AI in a more meaningful, human-centered way. And I was hearing little bits and pieces here and there, so I decided if there's an itch, I've got to scratch that itch. And started to do some research, which is an ongoing piece of work. And I'd love to hear from listeners about their own experiences of AI adoption. But the trigger piece was I looked at a piece that Boston Consulting Group, who are a big corporate consulting, put out. And they'd done a survey, and their headline was great, like women in senior tech roles are huge adopters of AI. But when you scratched underneath, the women who weren't in tech roles and weren't leaders were up to 21% behind the men in AI adoption. So I started to unpick a little bit about why that was, and I came up with 7 reasons why that might be, and looked at some solutions for how we could fix that at work.
And I'm interested in some of these reasons because you put it up on a LinkedIn post that people can go to. So, for instance, education comes right at the top of those list of 7 things. So
it's kind of, it starts off with the funnel, really, and at school, perhaps women and young girls, they don't see the role models there. And then where we do have organisations like the STEMettes in the UK, and there are many around the world, that's great, but they're only really touching the surface, and that gender bias is quite at an early age. So we see that only 1 in 3 young people 16 to 24 are women that are coding, and then at the degree level only 1 in 4 women get an ICT degree, and then only 1 in 5 study to the PhD level. So we're starting to see that pipeline of women who, before they get into the industry, is getting smaller and smaller. Then when they do get into work, we see that they're more likely to be in less senior roles, they're less likely to get get promoted, and they're more likely to leave the industry.
And another point that came out from your post is that women are more likely to lose their jobs to AI. You know, so putting it another way, AI is more of a threat to women's jobs than men.
Yeah.
So how
so this is before we even get to the adoption. These are like the endemic points.
Yeah.
But there was a piece of work that Goldman Sachs put out, and it's a very horrific piece, really, saying that up to 300 million jobs in Europe might go. But when you drill down to it, the types of roles that might become more susceptible to automation are in healthcare, or in admin, or in industries that are slightly skewed to where women are likely to work. So we have this huge whammy of less women designing the AI systems. The systems themselves are prone to have a lot of bias. So, for example, a piece of work that a research organisation called Careful Trouble put out showed that single mothers in the UK are more likely to have their benefits scrutinised by AI and rejected than any other group. So we start to see underrepresentation of women in AI models. Like, I try to create an image of a female surgeon supported by male nurses, and the AI just couldn't get anything in its image banks to draw off to create that image. So AI is drawing from models from the past, and it shows biases that might be going back 40, 50 years from their data models, because they just don't show women in terms of words and imagery reflected in different types of roles or activities.
I'm not at all surprised by that, because for this podcast we don't put a new picture up with every episode, but I've had to do that for previous shows I've worked on, and it was so difficult to find women in tech roles of any sort, or even using technology. It was always white men of a certain age, usually in a suit, or white, quite youngish men looking quite hip and, you know, good looking and whatever. That was the standard, and it became kind of a mission on any team I was working on. We've got to find the women, we've got to find the black people as well, because that was also, and obviously all of this, because there are so few photos using women and ethnic minorities, that all feeds into the AI and now the generation of it.
And if you're using Gen AI tools like your chat GPTs, remember it's leveling all the content that it's had put in. It's trying to find the averages. So it's never going to give you anything exceptional at the other end, but it tends to give the average of whatever's there. So it's very, very then hard to see that representation. But I think what's really interesting to your global listeners is that we think of AI adoption as everybody's very enthusiastic. Maybe if we listen to Somewhere on Earth and we're listening to tech podcasts, then we are already natural adopters. But on the whole, people in the world don't feel like that. So most studies seem to show an even balance between people really enjoying AI and seeing it as the future for their work and lives, and about the same number seeing it as the opposite. Some studies, like the Edelman research, the trust barometer is 1 in 3 pro, 1 in 3 against, and 1 in 3 undecided or in the middle, and some models are even more extreme than that. But what we do see is that actually that adoption is also not even. So the global south countries tend to be more enthusiastic AI adopters, perhaps because they're less concerned about privacy, they see more opportunity, but particularly China, India, Brazil often come up in the list. And there are more women working in the AI industries, particularly in academia, in this area. But we do see that the global south countries, very enthusiastic users, but also women are less enthusiastic as well. So women are less likely to say that they're excited. I met a young lady the other day who's studying at the moment. I said, "What are your feelings about AI?" And she said, "I find it really scary." So we need to get away from this mindset that AI is something techie, it's something likely like to do with computers, that men are likely to do and be better at. The whole tech bro culture around the AI industry, but around even just AI adoption, it's made to feel often very confusing by people who want to sell you complicated tools and make it seem something that you couldn't possibly do. And that's also putting a lot of women off, whether we were talking about using it in their work lives or their home lives. So we see quite a few barriers already.
And I'm going to put Patricia on the spot here. I know you come in here, Patricia Reichel, to talk about your book, which we're going to get to very soon. But Patricia is one of our loyal listeners from days of old. And Patricia, one thing that I know about you is that you help people with computing. Often people who are not necessarily the kind of people you'd expect to be into computing, might be older people, for instance. You can tell me what the male-female split is here. But have you seen anything? Have you come to any conclusions when you look at specifically at women about their attitudes to technology, or maybe their feelings about technologies and technology culture's attitudes to them?
Well, I would say that the split that I help with training is probably 50-50. And it's interesting because I sense the women lack confidence more than the men. So I do notice that. And yet, I think sometimes the women are more methodical, step-by-step, linear thinking. And you can get, well, of course, you get men that think like that as well. But there's also reluctance for a man to ask for help. So they might struggle on, and struggling on when you don't really know what you're doing can lead to bigger problems, can lead to scams, can lead to keeping it to yourself, going to websites you shouldn't perhaps go to, leading to trouble. Women, maybe because I'm female, they'll come to me and they'll say, I've gone to a certain website, perhaps I shouldn't have done that. That's led to some problems, and they're opening up. But there is that type of mindset that you notice with a woman that will, think will be quite successful in computing given the right steps.
It's all, I think, there about having a supportive environment. So you're providing that support to users coming to you. But in a more of a corporate setting or a commercial workplace, you would think that everything would be very even. I was going to say even Stephen, but even that would be showing you biased language.
Even Stephanie or something.
Well, even everyone. But we should be providing these tools and facilities and training to everyone if we're using Gen AI or other types of AI tools at work. But what we start to see is that even when all things are equal, women are less likely in the workplace to do that. And again, I have theories, but I'd love to hear from listeners. But one theory is that women have more side of desk activity, which is a horrible expression, but it means that women are being tasked at work to doing more additional work, supervising groups, and they're just too busy. Then we see in their home lives, they're probably taking on more of the care duties. So because employers are typically dumping technologies like AI tools like Copilot and ChatGPT onto employees without the right structure or training or outcomes and saying, experiment, get busy, which is a great philosophy in life. But if you're really busy at work, you don't have time to experiment, and you don't necessarily have the confidence to say, am I doing this right or am I doing it wrong? So it's all about having the right strategy and inclusive environment, and then that will help everybody to use AI at work.
Right, so yeah, which is great. So you partially, or maybe even fully, answered my next question, which was going to be, okay, so what do we do about this? So you mentioned there almost like a sort of structural reappraisal of the way technology works and is funded and the whole. So this is quite wide-ranging what you're calling for. So what would you add to that? What needs to happen?
Yeah, it's not as complex as it sounds. And I also have a model which anyone is free to use this model. I don't own it, but it's just how I like to popularise it. And the 10-20-70 learning model. So anyone in learning has probably got a similar pyramid like this. But in terms of your effort and your time, spend 10% thinking about the technology that you're going to buy and making the right decisions. 20% of your efforts, spend it on the data and the processes, making sure all the data in there is really high quality. And 70% of your effort from then on is about people adoption. So that's just your end users, making sure there's a lot of clarity about how you're using AI, but in particular your employees. And there's actually European regulation for those who are trading at all in Europe at the moment that's going to mean that you have to provide that training by February next year. So there's a lot for businesses to do, but you've got to start thinking more people orientated, because right now people are frightened about losing their jobs. They're frightened of the AI, of what it does and what comes out the other end. We're seeing a lot of risks with dodgy data and dodgy misinformation coming out of AI. So it's being much more slow and controlled about it. And I call this process slow AI. So instead of having it all at once and trying to take over the world with AI, organisations particularly think about being more methodical and having a plan in place before leaping in.
I think also increase the number of women in roles where AI decision making is needed, because if they're kind of forced to embrace it, then they'll just have to do it. Don't just leave it to the men. But unfortunately that's happening because many men are decision makers in particularly the tech world,
and there certainly are good female role models and some brilliant trainers. Just like to give a shout out to Heather Murray, is great from AI for non-techies and provides lots of great information. So there's huge numbers of people out there who are there to help you. They give some bits of advice for free if you're trying to do it yourself and learn. If you are getting support from your employer, ask them to bring in some trainers and also start to put together a better, more solid solid plan of how AI is going to work for your organisation.
But actually, women are, will be brilliant at developing AI. And, think about, who is on your development team. Get more women on at this level, because women score more in verbally in standard tests. So we use more words and provide more context. And that's something that generative AI really, really likes. Now, if my husband was here, he would say, why use one word when 20 will do? Because we do talk more, especially Polish women. We don't shut up. And we're also not afraid to say, that's not right, do it again. Maybe because we might do that more with children when they're learning, for instance. And that's the kind of thing you need when AI is being developed. So women, get out there, start developing it, because you're going to be very good at it generally, I think.
Yeah. Brings us back to Ada Lovelace Day, raising awareness and those all important messages. Thank you both. All right, so we all have a novel in us. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but it is basically true. But not all of us, of course, make that novel reality. Well, of course, we just met somebody who has. You've already heard from Patricia Reichel. And she's sitting here with this wonderful book. She's got it on the desk here in the studio, on the studio table. And Patricia, she had no sweet advance from a publishing company. There was no great big publicity tour around glitzy literary festivals. Patricia started with an idea and then made it up as she went along, learning about publishing and ebooks and even audiobooks. So if you have that novel inside you, listen up, because you're about to get some valuable advice about how to make it happen, even including that essential of today's times, indeed, the audiobook. Lots of advice coming up here from Patricia Reichel. So she and her co-authors, Beth Jackson and the late Robert H. Dodd, well, their book has just come out as an audiobook. Don't Break My Rice Bowl is the title. And to set the scene, it's the late 1960s, and an American agriculturalist has gone to Vietnam to help make the country self-sufficient in rice production. But there's a slight technical problem. There is a war raging. So this really is a history of the Vietnam War that you never knew. And we're going to talk about the book's central character. This is the agriculturalist at the centre of the book, Patricia. He's Eddie, and he, I think we can say, or can we, had a daughter, but you are the daughter of the author. We can say that much, can't we, Patricia?
Yes, we can. But my dad never really said that he was Eddie. He was writing a novel, and that's the thing that I've had to make that connection. And when you check out all the different things that my dad did, he was an agricultural expert, just like Eddie. He went to Saigon, just like Eddie. At the same time, he went to Manila, which happens earlier in the book, just like Eddie. He did everything just like Eddie. And so you go, maybe he is Eddie.
Good thesis to work on. Because it's a manuscript that he'd written. You discovered it subsequently, and then led to you sitting here with a published copy of the book in front of you.
Yes, that's right. So in 2020, what happened is I had seen this manuscript earlier in my life, but my younger self had overlooked it. And that's an interesting one, because I've wondered, why did I overlook it? But I did. I had the only copy, and it was in my drawer for years. But in 2020, I thought, let me read that manuscript again, and it hit me instantly. I was like, I've got to do something with that. Why have I overlooked it? And so that's it. And here's the manuscript right here. So Gareth, you can kind of get an idea.
Okay.
And
That's
you can
great.
see the dog-eared.
I love this. Okay, so to explain, so you brought in, it's a pile of A4 paper, and it's good 4 or 5 centimetres thick. And I'm just grabbing the front page, and it's so dog-eared, as Patricia says, that the title page actually is loose from the rest of it, isn't
That's
it?
right.
So, and Don't Break My Rice Bowl, so that's the obviously the title, by Robert H. Dodd.
And you can see that it's in the dot matrix font, which did cause us some trouble. So my dad wrote this on his Osborne portable computer, And I never thought of him as a real techie person, but then if you think back to the 1980s, who was? It wasn't really the digital age, was it? But he had that computer and he was very excited about word processing. And I do remember that sound. You know, people that remember the dot matrix print, that noise of it going back and forth and the ripping.
Well, yeah, and this is, I mean, to explain to our younger listeners, this is when printers were not these things that, you know, will just, where a nice, beautifully presented piece of script comes out almost instantaneously. The printer had a print head and it scanned very laboriously along each of the pages, didn't it? Using little dots, basically, sort of pixels kind of stamped onto the page.
And it made a squeaky sort of sound.
It did, yeah.
It?
And it took ages to print a single page.
I
and
think
to
it took like
got...
a couple of hours to print this
It would have done. That would have taken this manuscript ages. So there we are. So we're going to a bit of computer history. But I think, and before we pick up on the rest of the tech story behind this and your journey into publishing, it'd be nice to hear a little excerpt from the book, if you don't mind. This is from the newly released audiobook. And we'll set the scene here. We're in a village, I believe, with some farmers. And you can tell me more, Patricia, but in this scene, what I'm reading from it is they're really feeling the effects of the war, aren't they?
They are. At the beginning of our book, and it's something that Beth and we added, there is a quote that it's not what you look at, it's what you see. And that's there for a reason. That's our little bit that we added in at the beginning. And what's happening about halfway through the book is Eddie, the main protagonist that I've mentioned before, is meeting the farmers, meeting the villagers. They're coming in from the rice paddy and they're starting to open up about the effects of the war. And Eddie is realising, wow, everybody is affected by the war. Everyone has lost someone. And you hear these different voices, and it really does come alive in the audiobook. It just sort of brings it to life more, I feel, than the paperback or the hardcover or the ebook. I like all of them. They all are good in different ways. But there's something about
you hear the voice.
You hear the voices, and you hear the crack in the voice, and the one farmer talks about his son is missing, and you just think, what would that be like to have someone go off and you don't know what's happened and you're not told if they're missing or dead.
Well, let's hear this excerpt.
"The war bleeds us," another man said softly as he exhaled a cloud of white smoke and casually brushed it away with a lazy wave of the hand. "Our young men leave and never return. Often we are not even informed how they were killed. 2 in my family are listed as missing. One of them, my son."
Oh, so evocative, that excerpt. Thank you, Patricia. Right, so let's crack on with the whole story here. The story of the story. How did this get published then?
I think, first of all, I did not imagine the end result. And maybe that's a bad idea, but I think it would have put me off if I thought, I want a hardcover, I want a paperback, I want an ebook, I want an audiobook. I would have thought, you've gone mad. Stop it. Just keep the goals small and simple. I started off with just wanting a PDF. A little bit lacking in confidence, and we had to start off taking this pile of papers, and it wasn't digital. The Osborne computer, I don't know what happened to it. We think it just got chucked out or recycled, I don't know, but we didn't have any digital file. It was only this paper copy.
So you had to just type it all in?
Well, we tried doing optical character recognition, software that basically takes an image and converts the text. We tried doing that. We tried Google Docs, where you can scan something and plonk that picture in. But it did weird things with our dot matrix print. It took little chunks, sort of circles, and put them in different places. And I said, this is awful. It's doing something really weird with our documents. So we decided we would do dictation to help. And then actually, we're both quite fast typists. And there's something just quite relaxing, particularly when you're not thinking about it and you're just tickling the keyboard here. And we had the 2 of us working on it. Beth lives in Arizona. So sometimes with the time zone difference, it was quite handy because we just would go to the end of the document, whoever was around, she's 8 hours ahead. it meant that we were often working on this
or
project.
behind, I think, isn't it? In America, did you say?
So, or behind, I'm sorry,
Yeah, of course,
8 hours
yeah.
behind.
So you'd finish at, I'd say, midnight or something, and then
She'd pick it back
that
up.
would be her evening's work.
And we'd have a little bit of overlap, but
Yeah.
the typing had to happen, and we that's what we did. Then 2 years later, because we did take our time, we had something like this, which is printed out, it's in digital, it's Microsoft Word at this point.
So now what you're showing me is not something that looks like the size of a paperback book. This again is like A4-ish in size.
Yes.
But
about a quarter of the
yeah,
height.
exactly. So it's like a paperback book, but A4 size rather than the kind of thing that you see on your bookshelf. But so that was the first proof of the book then, was it?
It was, and I was thrilled
So
when
you
I
should have
got
been.
one of these.
Going
I was like,
with the cover.
we're starting to move in the right direction here. This
Yeah.
is good.
But-
And I didn't know how good it was going to
But
come out.
I still want to know how you went from that to actually it existing, because now you put it on platforms like Amazon, isn't it? You can all these kind of places where you might search for books, whether they're ebooks or actual physical books. How did you get there? That's what I want to know.
Okay, so once you've got something like this, you've got to create a PDF of the document. That is the sort of the bones of a paperback. And I suppose I should step back. We took our Word document, it went into InDesign, and then we wanted it all very professional. So we got, first of all, we had proofreaders, then we had typesetters. We didn't want to do all that ourselves because we wanted it done right. Because I've only got one book. I wasn't going to mess it up. I was trying not to. So it has to go through, ideally, proofreading, typesetting. Then in InDesign, you can export your file and it can become a PDF, which is en route for your paperback and hardcover. We have the same PDF because the internal bit is exactly the same. Even though the hardcover looks bigger,
Right.
it's the same.
And so that's in a form that's compatible with all these different platforms.
That's what they want,
books,
PDF
right.
for the inside of their book. And for an ebook, it's EPUB. And you can have one that's sort of a fixed or flowable type text. Like a cookery book, you probably want that fixed because it's pictures and writing. We did the flowable one, so you can change the writing size or the font size. It did cause some trouble because we've got some spot illustrations and they were slightly difficult. We had to end up putting our spot illustrations, which go at the beginning of each chapter, under the heading. It didn't like it above it, which is how it is in the paperback. So we had just adapted
So you're
that
just
bit.
learning all these things.
Yes.
As you say, it's not like you have a big publishing house behind you that can just help you with this. You're just DIY, probably watching YouTube tutorials on different aspects of it as well, figuring it out as you
We
went
did
along.
get some help. That was frustrating. We had some moments where I did think, is this perhaps getting a bit carried away? But I don't know why, but I was so determined. And I think it's because my dad died in 1987. He finished writing his manuscript in 1983. And when I was 17, I got to see it. And so I think that emotional connection was quite strong. Also, he died very tragically when he was 50, and there's a story behind that, and that makes it all more compelling. I'm around to tell his story. He isn't, and that's the big thing. So that was the emotional push, but it was a lot of technical obstacles. But luckily, Beth, my co-author, that's my dad's second wife, she has editing experience, librarian skills, very good at editing. You need a very good editor. And you also then really need a proofreader. And then you need a cover design person. Well, enter Stage Right, my daughter Justine Reichel.
Very talented with art and design.
It felt too good. It's like, is somebody just blessing me from above somehow? How can this be? We've got all this talent in here. And then once we had our paperback and hardcover, you can create the ebook very easily. Then we just took a break because we've got other things. We're working and doing other things. Then I've always imagined this book in audio because it's got 34
and
characters.
in fact, the audiobook, I'm going to tease the listeners here, and I think we should talk about that in the subscription version of this podcast as our pod
Right.
extra. Partly because we're a bit out of time already, so
Right.
and we can do it properly in the podcast subscription version of this podcast. Anya.
I just think it's fascinating what you're saying about, the different formats for publishing, particularly the ebook, the fixed one or
The flowable,
the
yes.
flowable, because I think what the flowable version has done is really opened up books for people who have sight problems
Yes.
and also kept a lot of older people in touch with new literature that's coming out, because you read a book, and as your eyesight gets worse, some people don't have access to the to new glasses at all, or you don't change them frequently enough, and particularly if you're elderly, and you lose that very much. But if you have that option that you can then make the text bigger, you have that link there to either your favourite books or new ones that are coming out. And I think that's really, really critical to ageing populations around the world.
I've got some clients. This is where it was handy thinking of my clients, because they were helpful in being our beta readers, some of them. And I knew that some of them had macular degeneration. Some might be dyslexic. I've got a neighbour who's dyslexic, and she said, I struggle with ebooks. I just had a lot of insight from different experiences, a lot of older people with eyesight problems. And I was thinking about the Vietnam veterans. They're going to be in their 80s. So I wanted it to appeal. And you've got various different fonts and sizes with the ebook.
Okay, good. All right. Well, let's just finish this segment. I'm going to come back to you. I've got one more question, but I would like to hear this clip as well. So we've shifted now from those farmers talking about how the war's affecting their lives. Kind of on the other side of the story, we're now with the American soldiers posted in Saigon. We're in a bar. It's late at night. Eddie and his companion having a few drinks, and they're finding out there's some like dodgy dealing going on, isn't there?
That's right. So during the Vietnam War, there's a lot of corruption. And I base my knowledge on this book. I don't proclaim to be an expert in the Vietnam War, but I know this book inside out. And there was a lot of corruption, a lot of barges coming down the Saigon River and just getting towed off somewhere else. And then those goods end up for sale in some market somewhere else. They don't get properly documented, and no one seems to know what's going on. And the Americans did form some of that security patrol around the docks. So during this meeting in the bar, so Eddie and his friend Ted, they're both the agricultural experts, they are talking to this young soldier who is a security guard. And he's a little bit drunk, and you can tell when you listen, and he tells them what goes on at the docks.
People with big money, man. Piastres, dollars. They want to buy an hour of your guard duty time. You know, only 1 hour. Just don't be anywhere near warehouse number 6 between, say, midnight and 1 o'clock. That's all. No problems. No shooting. Just a regular, everyday sort of break-in at warehouse number 6 when you happen to be patrolling over at warehouse number 10. You know, no big deal. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added casually, there's a job on tonight.
Dodgy dealings going on there in the Vietnam War. A whole aspect of the war that I didn't know anything about, and your book, your father's book as well, has brought to life. Patricia, thank you. And we're talking to you because the audiobook has just recently been released in the last couple of weeks. How can people find it?
The audiobook is available on Audible, but we also decided to make it available in other platforms. So Google Books has got the audiobook, and if you just Google "Don't Break My Rice Bowl," Robert H. Dodd, or my name, Patricia Reichel, then you will find it. We deliberately chose to not have it exclusively with Audible because we wanted it to be available. The way we've done it, it will end up in libraries. It will end up being cheaper for some people. We didn't want Audible to dominate.
Okay, yeah. So I said there'd be a final question, because the whole premise of this item is people might have this book, this novel inside them that they just want to get out there into the world. Final word of wisdom from you, Patricia, about like, should they do it? And then just how do you told us kind of how to do it, but what's the one bit of advice then to go and get your novel out there as you have?
I think probably to not imagine the end result, which might sound strange when you've got a goal, should you have your end result in mind, because you're not quite sure how it's going to look. I think keep an open mind. We didn't really realise that a forward and an after would be a good thing for our book. We added chapter names, things evolved. It became this organic process of turning this manuscript into something. I know our situation's a bit unusual, but a lot of people have got stories inside of them. And I think you do need to know it's a lot of work, but there is something magical. Like when I was in Oxford Blackwell's and they wanted 5 copies. It was only 5 copies, but I was thrilled. And a gentleman there in the shop said, oh, would you sign the books? And I thought, oh, I'm feeling like a real author here. I'm signing books. And he put stickers on them, and he did a face out display, which means it's facing out. It's better than just in the shelf. And we were next to Joan Didion and Charles Dickens, and I thought, well, you can't get better than that. And that's the magic of having a go. And I would never want to put anyone off, but it's a great thing to try.
Great. Patricia, thank you so much. Patricia Reichel, a loyal listener and co-author, telling us about Don't Break My Rice Bowl. That's it for Somewhere on Earth for this edition. Big thanks to you for listening, and of course to our amazing team. So behind the glass we have Liz and Callum, and Keziah, I believe, is still there. Anya's around the table here with us. You've heard from Susie and Patricia today. There's more coming up in the subscription extra. And I'm Gareth here at Lanson's Team Planet in London. Bye-bye.